and thank you everyone for joining us for the third meeting of this series. This will be the third meeting for HB 1617 for barbers and cosmetologists, and the second meeting for HB 1479. Our first order of business is to recap our last meeting and approve the meeting minutes. So we heard from the Forestry Association as well as the Forestry Commission and the Forestry Board, all parties involved on some of the issues that are impacting their licensure, as well as entertain any follow-up questions for barbers and cosmetologists. There weren't any. Does anybody have any edits or changes to make to our meeting minutes from last week? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve our minutes?
This is Kelly. I'll make a motion to approve minutes.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please?
This is Ashley. I'll second.
Great, thank you so much. Anyone against approving minutes, or if everyone's good, we'll just continue on. Great. All right, so as I mentioned, our first order of business is to review and approve the report for HB 1617 related to barbers and cosmetologists. Council members should have received a draft report, I believe yesterday, highlighting our findings. Did anybody have any questions or comments regarding that report? Just to highlight some of the findings in that report, we found that the practice of barbering, cosmetology, hair design, nail removal, and aesthetics requires a specialized skill or training, supporting the need for licensure, as well as the addition of hair removal specialists that presents a danger to the citizens of Georgia and should be included in the licensure over the board. So with that, I will take a motion to approve the report that was submitted to the council with the recommendation to approve HB 1617 for passage.
This is Kelly. I'll make the motion to approve. Thank you.
All right, so we will just go through the list of agencies and vote yay or nay. So we've got a State Accounting Office.
Yay.
Department of Natural Resources.
Yay.
OPB, we vote yay. Department of Revenue. Do not believe they are in attendance. Secretary of State's office.
I don't feel qualified to vote on a barber and cosmetology issue.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Darren Meckler with the Secretary of State's office.
Gotcha. Yeah, Sam Teasley is our council appointee, and I don't believe he is in attendance. Department of Public Health. I do not believe they're in attendance. Is Representative Tom Kirby online? And Senator Harbison. I was mistaken. We do not have quorum.
Hi, Megan. This is Ashley at the Department of Agriculture. We vote yay.
I think I already have your vote. So we've got 4. All right, we will put this
looks
vote.
Like you need 5.
Yes, we'll put this vote on hold then, and potentially revisit it at the end of this meeting and see if some other agencies end up joining a little bit late. I apologize for that. I thought we had quorum before we got started. All right. So next we will move on to HB 1479 related to foresters. The first point on our agenda is to present some OPB staff research that we didn't have a chance to get to last meeting. So Jacob, if you'll go ahead and share your screen and walk through what our office has compiled.
Yeah, absolutely, Megan. Can everybody see this all right?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you all for letting me have this opportunity to speak with you all in preparation for our meeting regarding HB 1479. My name is Jacob, and alongside my partner, Zach, we just did some state-by-state research on the licensing of professional forestry across the country, and we compiled our research into some quick facts that we'd like to discuss with you all. One of the first things that we wanted to take a look at to give us a sense of context when considering HB 1479 is which states across the country actually do license forestry and which ones do not. Out of the 50 states in the country, there are 18 that license or register forestry as a profession, Georgia, of course, being one of those. And throughout the course of this presentation, I will refer to licensing and registering forestry as one and the same. Certain states use one term, certain states use others, and some even use both, but for all intents and purposes, they are the same idea. Taking a look at Georgia, there are a few criteria that a forester has to fulfill in order to obtain a professional license. Mr. Miller and Mr. Stone covered these a little bit during our meeting last week, so I don't want to spend too much time on those. I do want to make a note that just something that we found is that Georgia law does not provide for the licensure of a forester who only holds a 2 years associate's degree. Out of the 18 states that do license forestry professionally, there are certain ones that do have provisions that allow a 2-year degree holder to obtain a license, but Georgia is not one of those. I also wanted to note just briefly that forestry licenses in the state of Georgia must be renewed every 2 years, and the renewal fee for doing so is $80. This, alongside the educational requirements and the experiential requirements for obtaining a professional license in the state of Georgia for forestry, are on par with the other states across the country that license professional forestry. Considering that one of the major provisions of HB 1479 is relocating the State Board of Registration for Foresters from the Secretary of State's office over to the State Forestry Commission, we wanted to take a look at where similar boards across the country are originally housed. And we found initially that actually out of the 18 states that license forestry as a profession, only 16 of those states, Georgia being one of them, have a board that's dedicated specifically to the licensing of professional foresters. And if you take a look at where these 16 boards are typically housed, there's not a whole lot of uniformity between them. The most common places that these boards are typically housed are within departments of agriculture and or forestry. Some are located within departments or offices within states that are dedicated specifically professional licensing. A few are housed actually independently. And Georgia is actually one of 2 states that currently has the State Board of Registration for Foresters housed within the Secretary of State's office. There are 4 states that do have them housed within a certain board or a certain department, but those don't seem to really have much uniformity when compared to the rest of the United States. And that is actually all of the major points that we had for our research. We just wanted to cover briefly the general trends on where Georgia stands in relation to the requirements for licensure, as well as where the State Board for Registration of Foresters are typically housed. I appreciate you all allowing me to speak. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if there aren't any, I would be happy to, let's see. Yes, sir, Mr. Walker.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, and yes, ma'am.
Mr. Walker can go first.
All right.
Did I hear you say that some states allow a licensed forester to have a 2-year associate's degree?
Yes, sir, that is true. And typically, in order to compensate a like a less strenuous academic or educational requirement, they do typically require a forester to have a longer duration of supervised experience.
I wonder if the Georgia Forestry Association would want to comment on that at all. Andres, is that, are we having a hard time finding licensed foresters?
Brian Stone, do you have anything to add, or is that why you
Yeah, I
got your hand?
can, and I think Andres is actually speaking and he's on mute. But I would just say this: we got our executive director Darren Mickler on here too, and he can confirm this. We do have a track for associate degreed forestry graduates to receive licensure in the state. I believe the way that was presented, it seemed as though maybe you were saying that does not exist. Darren, can you speak to that?
Yeah, we do have a path. The issue was that there was an associate's degree program at ABAC. And that program ended, and we attempted, I believe it was last year, to remove that path to licensure and through rule, and it got kicked back from the governor's office. So technically we have a path to licensure, but we don't have a program in the state that offers an associate's.
But our rules do allow for us to, if there was an accredited program that was an associate's degree accredited program from another state, if an individual came in and wanted a license in the state of Georgia, we can accommodate that. Our rules do still allow for that. And Darren, to speak to the timeline on that, that was the previous administration under Governor Deal was when we attempted that, and the decision was not to approve that request. And, we were fine with that. We were just trying to align it with our in-state schools and what was being offered in-state.
And I don't believe that we've had any applicant come to us with an associate's degree. I mean, not that I can recall recently.
So
No,
what's the labor pool workforce look like on foresters? Is there labor shortage? I mean, I hear it from land surveyors consistently telling me that nobody's getting into that field and that they're aging out, and there's a shortage of land surveyors. Is there a shortage of, I'm just curious, is there a shortage of foresters, and maybe should we encourage Middle Georgia State or somebody to develop an associate's program?
Sure.
Senator Walker, thank you for those. Chairman Walker, thank you for those questions. And I don't have anything to add other than what Mr. Stone and Mr. Mickler added there with regards to the fact that we don't have a 2-year program currently in the state, but we did commission the Carl Vinson Institute of Government at the University of Georgia actually to give us those numbers on where the gaps are currently and where they will be in 5 years with regards to registered foresters here in the state, or foresters in the state, both on the technical side as well as the 4-year foresters. And there is a gap, and there is a need for additional training and programs to be able to produce more of them. What we hear from our university systems is that they actually could train more with existing capacity that we have. But simply need to get more people kind of funneled into those. One of the challenges we have is that one of the programs is at the University of Georgia, and it's fairly difficult to be able to get in there as a freshman anyway. So they depend on people transferring in from other schools to be able to complete that degree at the University of Georgia. So there's some additional steps, maybe obstacles that are out there that make it a little add to the process of being able to get that degree from UGA. But many students now are coming out of ABAC, and I think there's opportunities for us to enhance both schools and their ability to be able to get students out.
I will
Good
say
question.
that we don't have anyone calling the office saying they can't find a forester, to be honest. I mean, we're not desperate like we are for surveyors. I don't think that situation is quite the same.
Well, I'm
No,
happy to
I'll-
work with you all on that if you see a need.
Thank you. Yeah, what we've seen is that the from many of our landowners is that they are struggling in many instances to have foresters for some of their land, especially as we've seen a lot of the territory that foresters cover is getting larger and larger. And there's different types of foresters out there that service different types of landowners. So some of them that work for the large investment firms that may own land from here to Texas, from Georgia to Texas, and others that that service kind of the mom and pop, you know, the 150, 200 acre landowner, 50 acre landowner in the state. And so those are two very different types of jobs that require different skill sets, and in particular on a smaller scale, the folks that are servicing landowners under 200 acres is where we tend to see a gap there. And I know Mr. Stone, that's what his company does, so he may be able to speak to that directly from the private industry perspective.
Yes, Andres, you actually read my mind there. So we're part of I'm a part of one of the largest forestry consulting firms in the United States, and really in North America. We're one of the top 5 consulting firms, large consulting firm that our primary land base that we oversee is from Georgia to Texas, Gulf South. And to speak to this particular question, I would agree with Andres. There is a need in our state for an associate's program or even a one-year program, maybe with one of the community schools. Those tend to be the places where we find individuals that have interest in doing the field work, the work in the woods. That is a place where we're short. Now that we have 2 4-year programs within the state, most people that go and make that commitment to a 4-year degree, they're I guess you'd say their professional track is that in their mind oftentimes is to end up doing something in forestry that's outside of the field work, because that's the nature of the progression in our industry. So there is a need. I think that's all I can do is just reaffirm the fact that there is a need for either an associate's program or a 1-year certificate program within the state, without a doubt.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions regarding the research presented?
This is Kelly. I just want to, can you share your screen again, Jacob, and go back to the map?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm hoping one of our foresters can kind of walk through, you know, there's 18 licensures. I'm making some assumptions in my head. There's terrain, right? I would assume the reason there are so few licenses for forestry is because geographics, terrain, things of that nature. But can you explain maybe some other reasons why other states would not have licensure?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. One thing I'd like to mention is those states in green that are in the South are all members of the Association of State Boards of Forestry, ASBORF, and you know, through some of the research I think that OPB's been doing, I had some questions around that. That's one of the few board expenditures, I think, as far as a professional organization that we have. And that is the group that I referenced last time we met in regards to doing fee study and comparing fees to where we are now versus those other states. But specific to your question, yes, terrain, certainly, obviously those states out there in the middle, they don't have a whole lot of commercial forestry operations. You know, there is some up in the Pacific Northwest, but those states, for whatever reason, have chosen not to have a licensure board. What I would say, I think, is that the ones that are around us see it the same as us. It's a very key component to their industry, their state, is that rural economic impact is fairly great for forestry. And as you heard last time from GFA, Georgia is the #1 state in our nation in forestry and forestry products. And and probably employment as well, but I'd have to defer to Andres to confirm that. So that is indeed why you see that differentiation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to pause our discussion on HB 1479 for right now and revisit barbers and cosmetologists. Senator Harbison, we just did a quick review of our findings, and there was a motion to approve our report recommending passage of the bill with the findings that this is a profession that should require licensure. In the addition of the hair removal specialists would further protect the citizens of the state. Would you mind casting your vote to approve or to not approve our report?
I so move in the affirmative. Move to approve.
Great. Thank you so much. So that report is
Thank you,
approved.
Senator.
We will
Yes, sir.
post that on our website shortly, probably early next week, the finalized report, and send that out to all in attendance who are here for that particular bill. Seeing as that has been approved, Senator Harbison, if you'd like to drop off, you're more than welcome to, since you're not a part of the other group for foresters, or if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the profession, you're more than welcome to stay on with us.
Well, I think Senator Walker has been covered, so thank you very much. I'll drop off. Thank you.
Have a nice
Appreciate
day.
it. You too.
All right. Thank you all
Megan, may I
for.
say something?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry. Kay Kendrick with the Board of Cosmetology.
I just want to thank all of you for your time and for seeing the need for this, because with passage of this bill, we will be able to put to work a lot of single moms that otherwise would have to spend a long time in school getting a longer education, and this will give them the opportunity to have a decent income and be productive and be able to take care of their families. Thank you all so much for your time.
And thank you for answering all of our questions, Kay. We really appreciate it and your expertise.
Y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you too. All right, I appreciate everyone's patience. We will now move back to forestry. Just want to be conscious of everyone's time on both councils. So our next agenda item is to have another public comment period. If there's anyone, who's not part of the council who'd like to just say more about this bill and some of the impacts it would have, and then we'll move into questions for the council, or can maybe combine both of these items. Is there anyone who would like to just speak more on the bill, something that hasn't already been covered?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Hey, this is State Rep John Corbett, the author of the bill. Sorry about taking so long to get online, but I'm technology challenged when it comes to all these different type of platforms to get online and have these meetings. But finally got in, and I just want to say thank y'all for what you're doing, taking the time to look at this issue. And I just like to say that the whole intent behind the bill is just I think we can be a better fit to move this board to the Forestry Commission to just get better fit for our foresters and better, I guess, to help our citizens that out in the state with their forestry issues, have it in the Forestry Commission, and I'd be answer any questions if I can. So if there are any, if not, I appreciate your favorable consideration of approving this.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Any questions for the bill sponsor? We will move into our questions from the council. I have a few questions outstanding from our first meeting, but I'll turn the floor over to any of our council members who may have questions first. So I've asked Darren Mickler to attend here just because I had a few questions on, last session, the bill to move the professional land surveyors to their own independent agency was approved and signed by the governor. And I had a question for the professional licensing board. Since Foresters and that Pels group were all together in kind of that same trade group, I was curious what kind of workforce changes you expect to see once that transition has fully occurred. Because I know one of the main complaints, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the forestry board just feels like the investigations or attention to complaints are not as punctual or as time appropriate. And I was wondering if there was any type of workforce change as a result of Pels moving that would potentially solve that issue.
To be honest, I don't think we've seen any changes yet because, of course, Pels has not moved yet. We're currently functioning just as we have previously. To be honest, when Pels moves and if Foresters move, I would probably expect a realignment of boards and workforce, something probably larger than just, moving a small board around or something. I'd probably see something larger, maybe quite a few boards moving around, creating different sections. That's just a guess. Like I said, right now, nothing's changed. We're operating just as we have for the last 5 years.
I guess to further clarify my question, are there, not to assume that foresters will move to the Forestry Commission for oversight or as a attached agency, but when that Pels move fully turns over, do you foresee any, greater hours to be able to spend towards addressing forestry issues?
I mean, yeah, that's certainly possible. Yes. Again, Pels is the largest portion of that group. I mean, basically, it's larger than all the other 5 boards combined. So that's going to be a lot of work that's going to be removed from that section. So, I would say maybe 60%. So certainly there's going to be more opportunity, but again, I think that there will be other boards that will move in to take up that vacuum.
Okay. Thank you. And I know in our last meeting, Sam Teasley, who I don't believe is on this meeting, offered to talk with the Forestry Commission and the board as to maybe some of the things that SOS could do to address some of y'all's issues. I was just curious if that conversation happened and maybe if there was any type of resolution.
I've not heard that, which I haven't spoken to Sam about it at all, so I really don't know. So Megan, I can speak from my end. I did follow up at the end of the last meeting and sent Sam an email and offered some time slots to connect. And I did not hear back from him. I'm certain he's very busy and maybe just didn't have an opportunity. My intentions are to reach out to him by phone. I do believe that Director Lauermore did have an opportunity to speak with him. I'm not certain what that the topic was or what they discussed, but yeah, I certainly could allow him to speak to that if there's anything to report there.
Yeah, I did speak to Sam, but it was a really an introductory phone call, more so than anything. I'd not met Sam other than that was the first time I'd met him was on the call last week. We did talk about and then I shared with him my appreciation, as I did with Kelly, their thoughtful questions and comments that they made around the appropriations and the funding levels for these boards and to operate these boards. And he just shared with me that, I guess I think he said the Secretary of State gets back about a third of the funds that are generated from licensing boards in total. And he said, if it probably look a lot different, our staffing level would look a lot different in Secretary of State if we were to get all of those funds back or closer to made whole on those funds that were generated from licensing boards. But other than that, I mean, that was the nature and the tone and the tenor of the call I had with him. And, there was nothing outside of those lines that we talked about.
Thank you for that update. I appreciate it. Let's see. And then just further, I know that there's been a fiscal note that's been requested on this bill. It's currently being drafted, so we don't have anything to share at this point. But just to revisit, based on that conversation, y'all are still confident that this would basically result in an increase of $90,000 for that administrative assistant to help with board workload. And then I think we just mentioned something about fees for a professional organization.
Right. Yeah, that's the number. That's the number that I feel pretty confident with. We looked at it, way back when this bill was first being talked about. And we've gone back and revisited that, and we feel pretty confident that's a good number for us to, I guess it's my nature is, if we're going to do it, let's make sure we do it well and right out of the gate. And I think dedicating an individual to this to help with a transparent, smooth transition over is needed. And then ensuring that we can get the systems in place. We already have the ability to process credit card payments through a product we receive through Dell, through our nursery systems that we can integrate into. And we're very, one thing folks that are familiar with the Forestry Commission know that we have a reputation of a can-do kind of place. And we have an IT team that has developed websites in the past that are front-facing, public-facing, that can mirror into some of this existing software and infrastructure that we have. One of the prime examples of a website that we did internally with zero appropriation was for the timber harvester notification system that the General Assembly asked us to do. I guess it was 18 months ago, and we've brought that up. It's up and running, functioning, and counties love it. Timber harvesters love it. Is it as glitzy and glamorous as what you would get from a Fortune 500 IT company? Probably not, but it serves a purpose and it represents the state well for the service level that it provides. So that's the type of thing that I'm saying that I'm willing to absorb internally in using our existing team. But I think critical to the success and the transition over is to make sure we've got someone dedicated to quarterbacking that process along, and then giving the services that are needed to professional foresters in the state to ensure that they get what they need with licensings and continuing ed credits. And so yeah, I feel confident that's a good number for us still.
Megan, I can speak to the association of the Southern Association fees. That's $150 annually. So we're not talking about a significant impact.
Just 100, Brian.
100. Okay, thank you, Darren. So $100 annually. So it's not a big number. And in fact, I think I talked to someone. I can't remember. I talked to a couple of different people with your group. Maybe Cody had called, and I see Cody's online here today, and asked specifically around that charge and some of the other things that we're talking about here today, and certainly reaffirm the fact that it was one of the most important things we did, but it was very inexpensive. So
thank you for that. And then I believe my final follow-up question that I have is just based on some of the discussions and follow-up research that our group has done, as well as Cody Pyle, the analyst for Secretary of State, and Christian Hambry, the analyst for Forestry Commission. I just want to make sure. So in the past year, you all have had 3 complaints, correct, regarding just business processes. Is that
That's
correct?
Yes.
And then could you provide just a little bit more information about some of those complaints and the nature of them and what that resolution was?
Yes. Bear with me one moment.
Sure.
Sorry. Bear with me.
I appreciate it. I know that we've had a lot of conversations in between our first and second meeting on this bill, so I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay. So we did have 3. The initial complaint was it was against a previously licensed forester who had let their license lapse but continued working. The board requested that that person first sign a cease and desist order and then reinstate their license. So that person did sign a cease and desist order and then began the process of reinstating their license. The second 2 were involved. The one person was, let's see how to explain this. We had a respondent in the case who was being supervised by another person. And the board felt that the supervising person did not do an adequate job. So after some discussion, there was a letter of concern written to that person that was supervising the other person. The other person ultimately ended up with a consent order for substandard work. So 3 complaints, 2 board orders in those complaint cases.
And to your knowledge, or do you all track any complaints that you get from your licensees regarding, hey, it's taking me too long to get my paperwork processed, or I haven't heard back from you all on my application for licensure?
We haven't really tracked it. But we do. This board is different from most other boards in that everyone knows their board member. And Brian will attest to this. So if there's a problem, he or another board member is going to get a call and they're going to forward that person directly to me. So, we address those immediately. Probably our biggest issue, I think, is with our testing service. Sometimes when we refer someone to the testing service, they don't get contacted in a timely manner, or they're not given the correct information about how to register for their examinations. That's just one particular problem that we run into.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions that they'd like to ask anyone in attendance?
So Megan, is it out of bounds for me to ask a question?
No, absolutely not. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask Darren, since he's here, he and I have a good working relationship. And you know, he understands forestry. He comes from a rural background, and that's been a positive. So he understands the issues and he knows what's facing our board. And in particular, Darren, could you give her, and I know you know these off the top of your head without kind of going back into the system and pulling these up. Over the last, let's just say over the last 5 to 10 years, the major complaints and issues, could you summarize the severity of some of those where we ended up revoking licensure? And then the individual, I think one of the complaints you referred to earlier about the supervisory issue,
Sure.
really the individual had a prior complaint that was much more significant, where he was withholding funds from individuals. So fiduciary issues that ultimately led him into a corrective action, and the corrective action was ultimately what we filed a complaint against the individual that we had assigned to oversee him for corrective action, because that individual was not doing a very good job either. So Darren, could you just give us a
Sure.
kind of high level
as
on
Brian
those?
said, the founder of his company and my father were best friends growing up, and I used to work for his company in the summertime, so I have a little bit of background there. Yeah, in this particular case, there's a bond that is posted when say what do you call it, a timber harvester goes onto a property to cut the timber, and they want to make sure gates are put back, roads are fixed, that sort of thing. So there's a bond, and particular forester would not return the bonds when the timber harvesting was done and everything was okay, roads, fences, everything were fine, and he refused to return the bond, and that got the board involved with him. So very serious issues have been, one particular case, we had a person who was selling timber to multiple people, the same timber to multiple people, getting paid twice for the same timber, and then pocketing the money. That's some of the more severe things that we've seen. So when a mistake is made or some sort of deliberate act, it can result in serious loss to a landowner who maybe is getting some generational wealth that's only going to come along one time in their lifetime. So, it is important, and it can hurt someone financially pretty seriously. We have complaints about how a forester has cruised timber and, come up with the numbers they've come up with, or not following the landowner's direction about not cutting one part, or select cutting some part, and then they go and clear cut that whole area. So, those are the kinds of things that we see. It's relatively serious.
Yeah, Megan, I would say obviously those are very technical. As you, I'm sure some of you that maybe are not as familiar with forestry, as he explains that, it sounds very technical. And that reinforces one of our primary points. There's the synergy and the subject matter expertise of the Forestry Commission overseeing our board. And so another question I just wanted to ask Darren, just, he understands it again. He also knows that we have a working relationship with GFC investigators that we would intend to use for our complaints. So Darren, could you maybe share some thoughts around how you feel like our investigations would improve with that subject matter expertise, as opposed to the general investigators that you have at your for you to use there at the Secretary of State's office?
Sure. Well, the Forestry Commission is able to investigate criminal matters, and sometimes they will refer the matter, if it's not criminal or there's another element to it that relates to licensure, they'll forward it to the board. The investigators, we have investigators that aren't exactly trained technically to go out and determine those things. They have to be directed. For instance, if we send an investigator out, they would go to Brian, say, and get a list of questions to ask. But, that would be a general, ask this, ask that, A, B, C, D, E. And then, they wouldn't have a lot of expertise to ask questions on the fly, so to speak.
Yeah, follow-up questions, right?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I jump in real quick? Because it was
Yes,
my
ma'am.
understanding from our last meeting that oftentimes the investigators from the Forestry Commission assist Secretary of State's office in these investigations, or is that the process just, the referral of questions to ask?
Yeah, I don't think they've ever assisted us other
Okay.
than they've referred some issues to us that they looked at from a criminal aspect and then passed on to us to look at from the civil or licensing aspect.
And Megan, there's been times where we have referred things to them where there's timber theft and very severe things because they have the authority to act in a different manner than we do when it's criminal, versus ours is not. We're not in that position.
Great. Do you have any other follow-up questions, Brian, that you wanted to bring to our attention?
Not in particular, other than I would just say, we have a good working relationship with our executive director, as you can see here. And at the end of the day, what our ask is not because we're disenchanted with the people we work with. It's just that we feel like at the end of the day, working with the Forestry Commission and given their expertise and their ability to investigate our issues, that there's so many synergies there, and ultimately they know the customer. And I think I made that statement the other day. Foresters overseeing foresters. They understand the business we're in, and they know them. So instead of the board members receiving questions and calls and emails when there's problems, they go directly to staff, because inherently there probably is a problem there when the board members are constantly receiving calls, whether it's a license that hadn't been fulfilled, whether it's a complaint that they want to file a complaint. We get those and we have to point them to the process. You've got to go and you've got to file the complaint. We as board members do not need to be filing complaints. We need to stay impartial in that, and so that we can then hear the issue. That's my one takeaway is, and my ask for you guys is, as you consider this, is just to understand that we do not have ill will or towards the Secretary of State Professional Licensing Division. In fact, I've said all along, if this doesn't work out, we want to be in a good relationship because we got to keep doing it over there. So just thank you for your time, and that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to council discussion. So taking everything that we've heard over these past few meetings, does anyone from the council have any comments to make regarding this bill? And as to kind of what particular findings we may have as a result?
Megan, are we required to have a third meeting, I guess?
Yes, we're required to or we're not required, but we're scheduled for a third meeting. So we'll take a lot of the information that we've gathered and heard in this meeting and incorporate it into our report. In that third meeting, we'll to vote on that final report, highlighting our findings.
There's been talk about a fiscal note. That's not going to hold us up from voting, is it?
No, I anticipate that fiscal note will be completed by our December 20th meeting.
I don't think we're talking about material dollars. 90,000 in a $30 billion budget certainly is not material. So I would hope, whether or not we have it, we're still able to vote on this thing. it just seems to me it makes a lot of sense from a workforce development angle, from a compliance angle, investigative angle, knowledge of the industry angle. And this is not at all derogatory toward the Secretary of State's office by any means, but just seems like this bill makes a lot of sense to me.
Anyone else? I'll just I'll say I do have a few concerns just with, I guess, the precedent that this establishes in, you know, moving different boards to separate agencies. I think that a lot of the impetus behind the professional licensing board is to kind of recognize those economies of scale and have those investigators spread across multiple different boards, investigating multiple issues at the same time. And so, you know, I'm not sure what sort of precedent this sets with other boards, whether under PLB. I think there's also still some concerns regarding just the more administrative side of moving this to a separate agency, just from what we've seen with PAL's board, and creating those separate budget units, the accounting side. I don't know, Kelly, if you had anything else to add regarding that aspect of this move.
Well, I think, as I noted in the prior meeting, before the bill is finalized, we just want to make sure from the accounting standpoint that the verbiage is written correctly. That, because we've seen just, and it really is just how things are worded. It's not a go, no go. It's just to make sure that we know from an accounting standpoint that feeds into our annual state financial report that we're treating that revenue correctly. So it's just a courtesy pass by our team to make sure that the verbiage is correct. So it's really.
Ashley or Kate, any other council members, do you have anything to add before we conclude for today?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, well, we will take all of this information into consideration in our report. As I mentioned earlier, our next meeting is scheduled for December 20th. And we'll have that final report ready for voting, and you should know at the end of that meeting the council's decision. This meeting will be posted online early next week for anyone to go back and review or share with any interested stakeholders. Does anybody have anything else before we conclude for today? Great, thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.